minutes for the last meeting. I believe we have, I know that of a couple of corrections on here, but if you haven't already looked through those just to make sure you're covered there. If I may, start out with myself. That didn't indicate, it was called to order, and I don't know if it matters for the record or not, by the Vice Chairman, John Francis, and I missed the review of the previous meetings, which is correct, as well as for Greg. But Greg was here as we were neither one absent in total, I think. He came in maybe by that first motion, after the minutes were read. So if that correction could be made to the minutes.
Yes, we'll get that corrected.
They're not big deals for either he or I. Anyone else have any corrections or comments?
Move we approve.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Thank you. And we're ready for
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
presentation. Thank you.
Committee members, we have 4 items today for your consideration. Item 3A is an authorization to expend bond funds for project DC 0293, drainage repairs at 8 locations. These locations that you see on the cover page were all locations that were damaged in the heavy flooding of May 15th, 2015. As your memo indicates, between FEMA and the Oklahoma Department of Emergency Management, the city will be reimbursed 87.5% of the cost of these repairs. What this item is today is to ask your approval to move some old bond funds from the bond funds where they reside currently into what we call the grant fund, where all our federal grants are processed through, and the $37,000 that you see here is the 12.5% local share that the city is responsible for on all FEMA projects. We have a 12.5% funding responsibility. So these funds are available, and what we're asking for is your approval to move those funds from the bond funds into the grant fund, because that's where the contract is currently awarded. We awarded the contract last month, and there's actually been a significant amount of work done on a couple of these locations. Here's the location at 3901 North Martin Luther King Boulevard. We've got a before and after picture. The next location we have is 3308 Southwest 51st Street. This is the overflow channel at what we call the Twin Creek Detention Pond, which is there as you make the turn by the airport on I-44. On the east side of I-44, you'll notice there's a detention pond there. This is the overflow channel that sustained some damage last May. On the left, you see the damage that occurred, and on the right, you see the completed repairs. And our final location is at Northwest 32nd Street and I-44. This is Deep Fork Creek, and as you can see on the left, we had some of the channel liner give way and fail, and then here on the right is the completed repairs. We anticipate this work being done by July of this year, and once all the work is done, Oklahoma Emergency Management will come in and they'll do what's called a closeout, and any cost overruns that we incurred on the project that we can verify through presentation of contractor claims, they will give us additional funding to cover our costs, 87.5% of those additional costs. So it's a process that we've been through, unfortunately, numerous times since 1993. So we're very familiar with the process, and we're asking for your approval today on these funds.
Any comments or questions?
I'll ask a dumb question, I'm sure. You would ask if it's okay to go from one bond account to another bond account. And maybe obviously from what's going on with another city close to us and some of those things.
Yeah, actually, these are going from the bond funds into what we call the grant fund, which is a separate city fund, and that's an appropriate use. All of the actual contract for the work was awarded out of the grant fund, and when the federal funds are received and the state funds are received, they will be deposited directly into the grant fund. Our local share is coming out of some of these old bond funds, and that's why we're asking for your approval to move the money today. But it's an entirely appropriate use of the bond funds.
I have a question. You got before and after pictures?
Yes, sir.
So is that telling me the work's already been done?
Yes, but the contract's been awarded.
No, I mean, I'm looking at pictures. The contract's been awarded. It looks like the work's already been done.
On these locations, it has.
Okay.
The contract was awarded 100% using the grant funds.
Right.
They awarded 100%, and all this action does today is it allows us to reimburse the grant fund for our local share.
Okay. All right. Move we approve.
Still not quite through with questions and comments.
Yeah, but you're supposed to have,
Yeah,
I'll ask council.
The way the city operates it, it's questions and comments first.
Okay.
That's fine. I had a question that I thought either one of these people were about to ask. In light of the money situation the state's in, is there any risk of them saying, oh, we can't give you that money?
No.
Even though we're committed to, they're backing out of all kinds of
No.
commitments.
The state sometimes has been notoriously slow to reimburse the city, but as I said, I've been dealing with disasters in FEMA and Oklahoma Emergency Management since 1993, and they have never failed to reimburse us their 12.5% share. So it may take a while, but they will reimburse us.
Okay. So we'll worry about that when it comes down to it. Okay. Go ahead.
Move we approve.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Motion carries. Thank you.
Item 3B is declaring projects TC-0364 and TC-0365, the Intelligent Transportation System, or as we call it, ITS, complete and surplus the remaining funds. As approved in the 2007 bond authorization, this project originally involved the interconnecting of 18 listed corridors in Oklahoma City that had a total of 183 intersections that would be connected. Through technology enhancements and use of our city Wi-Fi network, we went to council back in 2012 and got approval to expand the scope of that project from 183 intersections to 751 intersections. The difference being, as opposed to on the 18 corridors and 183 intersection, all of those were originally planned to be hardwired, connected underground with what we call interconnect cable, and as a result of enhancements in technology, we're able to use the city's Wi-Fi system at a greatly reduced price and expand the scope from 183 to 751 intersections. That project is now complete at a cost of about a little over $12 million, and we have a surplus of approximately $874,000 left in the project. So in order for us to be able to use those surplus funds on new traffic projects, the first step is for this body to allow us to declare the original project complete and give us approval to surplus the additional funds for additional uses. Here's a little graph. The green is the 18 original corridors and 183 intersections, and then this is all the intersections that we were now able to do. This was a great thing for us because we're able to interconnect all these locations, move traffic along much more efficiently, help air quality so people aren't idling at intersections all the time. But that project is now complete. We just completed it earlier this year, and we'd like permission to surplus the funds so we can use those on other projects.
Go ahead.
Good luck.
You.
We have to get through the city's firewall.
Yeah. On the surplus, which is fantastic, I think, maybe lucky that the technology was changing. That general obligation bond going back in, the money going back in, just point of information, where does it get assigned to? Is it a similar area? Does it go into traffic, or does
Yes,
it?
it can only be used for
Okay,
traffic projects as was authorized in the bond proposition.
okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? I hear a motion. Second. And those in favor, aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Thank you.
Item 3C is an allocation of $500,000 in funds from those surplus funds that you folks just approved to project TC0446, highway lighting replacements along I-35 between Southeast 15th and Southeast 66th Street. As your memo indicates, Oklahoma Department of Transportation is responsible for a number of maintenance items when it comes to the interstate highways. The first paragraph in your memo, gives you some detail. One thing they are not responsible for is highway lighting. They came to us last year and indicated that a number of the highway lights along this stretch of I-35 were in various states of disrepair, and advised us that it was the city's responsibility to make the repairs to those highway lights. We in turn contracted with our on-call structural engineer. They went out and they did a pretty detailed analysis of all the light pole bases there along this stretch of I-35. There's a total of 91 lights. 53 of them require repair. 43 require minor repairs, as you see, and 10 of them have this type of damage, as you can see, which is really not good, and they have to be repaired, and unfortunately, the city has to pay for those. So we, as I said, we contracted with our on-call structural engineer, and he recently turned in his preliminary report, and he's given us an estimated construction cost on these of about $550,000. Now, I know that sounds like a lot just to replace some light poles, but the one thing that you've got to understand is that these repairs are going to be made under active traffic on a major interstate highway, and there's going to be a huge cost for traffic control involved with worker safety. And again, the city is responsible for these repairs. He's completed the preliminary report. At a future date, he will turn in final plans. He will probably have refined the estimate somewhat, but we're asking for your approval today to approve the $500,000 to, when the time comes, award the contract for the repairs of this highway lighting.
Any questions?
We've already approved 200,000.
approved.
That was engineering.
We had to use some of it for engineering, and there's been quite a bit of testing that's taken place on each one of these locations. So with the 500, we've got funds available still that'll go with that, but there's also going to be some project contingency. We always approve about a 10% contingency for, even if the bid comes in under the estimate, when you do a project like this, or any project for that matter, there may be amendments and change orders that we'll have to fund. So we're setting up excess funds right now, and again, as is the case with any project, once it's awarded, constructed, and finally accepted by the city council, any additional funds will go back and they can be used for additional traffic uses.
Exactly where the difference between 200,000 and 700,000?
Well, we've got,
Is that those 10 poles that they didn't realize was going to need maintenance?
no, we've got an estimated construction cost of 550. We set up 10% of that, 55,000 for a contingency. Our engineering is probably going to cost us about an additional $30,000 or $35,000. So our total cost is going to be about $640, okay? And we've got project charges for staff who spend time managing the project. And again, there can always be amendments and change orders, field changes and those type of things. So we overfunded the project at this point, but then this way we won't have to come back and ask your approval to put any more money in it. Once it's completed, any excess funds will go back in the control account. So. 53 of the 91, correct. And that comes out to about $12,500 per pole. It does seem pretty high. And again, I think quite a bit of it is going to be attributable to the traffic control that's required while they're making these repairs. Because again, you're under active traffic on a major interstate highway. We're going to have to divert the traffic over a couple lanes, and that's always going to have to be changing as we go through the limits of the project. So there's going to be quite a cost involved with traffic control. So. The lights are in the middle of the concrete barrier wall, as it illustrates. They're right in the middle. We're going to have to remove the old ones, prepare the base, pour concrete, bring in the new poles, put them. I mean, it's going to be quite a project. And unfortunately, the city has to pay 100%.
Do you have any feel for what it would just cost to put a new pole up? What a new one would cost?
Well, it's not so much the poles, it's the bases. As you can see,
Okay.
the bases are deteriorated. The concrete bases are all deteriorated. We're going to have to re-pour those, put new anchor bolts in. We may be able to use some of the existing poles also, but depending if there's any damage to those, we definitely want to replace those.
Do they modify a design after an experience like this for that base?
I imagine our structural engineer, he's been doing business with the city for a number of years. He's very good at what he does. He although I haven't read the preliminary report in a whole bunch of detail, he is going to provide us the best specification for those new bases that's available today. So yeah, it'll definitely be better than this. But I don't even know how old these are. I mean, these were installed back probably in the 60s or 70s. So they've been there a while.
I was remembering those sorts of dates when the first time we ever talked about this back originally. Any other questions or comments? May I ask for a motion? Second. Those in favor, aye. Those opposed, nay. None. Okay. Motion is approved. Thank you.
Item 3D is allocation of $100,000 in funds from the 2007 general obligation bond authorization unlisted traffic funds to Project TC 462, mid-block crossing on Northwest 23rd Street, approximately 250 feet east of Walker Avenue in Wards 2 and 6. The owners of the Tower Theater, you see there on the north side of 23rd Street between Hudson and Walker, have come to the city, and they want to partner with us to construct this mid-block crossing there at the Tower Theater, which will allow the patrons, not only from the Tower Theater, but any of the adjoining businesses there, to safely cross Northwest 23rd Street and utilize the parking there on the south side of 23rd. We have begun to draft the agreement between the city and the owners. It'll be a 50-50 cost share. We believe our costs will not be $100,000, but again, there's always the construction contingency. There's project charges from staff. There's going to be some testing. We plan on utilizing our on-call traffic control contractor to do that. These are some pictures that were used at the Traffic Commission back in March, where the crossing was approved by the Traffic Commission back in March. And these are the pictures that show exactly where it'll go. There is an existing median cut there that will be utilized for the crossing, and it'll be fully signalized, and when pedestrians come up to the crossing, they'll hit the pedestrian button, which will activate the signals, and if there's someone that wants to cross, it'll stop the traffic both east and westbound and allow the pedestrians either to go from the theater to the parking lot or vice versa back across the street. So this was approved by Traffic Commission. The agreement will probably go to council later this month for consideration. If the agreement is not approved, then these funds will not be necessary, but we need to get the money set up so in the event that the agreement is approved, we can get the owner's money, we can get our money, and then we can issue a work order to our contractor to begin construction.
I think this is a good idea. I'm curious, however, I noticed here wards 2 and 6.
Right.
Could you, a little explanation on that? It doesn't change the need for the cost, but I'm curious how it
The
affects
Northwest 23rd Street is the dividing line
Oh, I see.
between wards 2 and
That's
6.
right, that's right.
So it's in
South of...
that it spans the
23rd
entire
and
width of the
6th.
street. It's in both wards.
Right, that's right. Okay, thank you. I move the item.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, yeah.
Information.
Yeah, so we've got attached here our GeoBond executive summary. This is what we present to staff each month as we prepare for this meeting. So in the top left there, box 1, activities to date, just to direct your attention to the year to date, just under $35 million has been awarded in contracts, and that's not necessarily spent, that's just what's been awarded to contracts. The piece below that, you can see what's been spent year to date is $43.4 million. So that's on previously awarded contracts. As they progress through the work, we pay them partially as they go along. On the second box, number 2 there, these are, the top part is contracts that have been advertised and are in the process of being awarded. The second half of that box is what's expected by Public Works to be advertised over the next several months. And so you can see over the next 3 months or so, expect to advertise about $41.2 million worth of work. Our box number 3 is our 85% expenditure requirement. This is an IRS regulation that we spend 85% within 3 years of sale of the bonds. And you can see last month we achieved the 85% requirement for our 2013 sale year. Just passed that, just in time for our deadline of April 29th of 2016. I will point out, as we look at the 2014 sale, that's due next May. We have to have the 85% completed. And you'll see as you work your way across the table there, about $42.1 million is needed to reach the 85% level. And just as a point of reference, if you go back up to box 1, you'll see that year-to-date we've spent about $43.4 million. So in about 9.5 months, we've been able to spend $43 million. Achieving that $42 million by next May shouldn't be an issue for Public Works there. At the bottom half of the page here, we've got our cumulative contract awards and expenditures. The top line on the graph was kind of what Public Works had originally anticipated the schedule for awards would be. We've kind of fallen a little bit behind, and so you can see the square dotted line is what's actually been awarded, but as you can see from the amount that's being advertised, we'll be catching up here at the end of the year with their target to achieve their $70 million in contract awards. And then the last chart or graph here on number 5 takes a look at our fund balance projections going forward. We've just had our 2016 bond sale, and that's why you see that bottom line there of our cash fund balance, or our targeted unencumbered fund balance jumping up in June. When we get the proceeds from that bond sale, that will be increased significantly. So those are just some of the pieces of information that we provide to staff and that we have available as well. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions or comments? Okay. We'll move on to new business. Any new business?
I'd just like to make a comment. As the city is looking toward our next GO bond election and meeting with community groups and what have you on ideas that might be included in that, someone asked me a question over the weekend, and because they knew I was on this committee, and I couldn't honestly answer the question. And the question really had to do with a particular expenditure that was done probably 3 or 4 months ago. In any event, though, what the question raised for me was that we sit on this committee, and and routinely, with really not much, at least as far as I'm concerned, a whole lot of thought given to the millions of dollars, multi-millions of dollars, that we kind of nod and say, as a citizen group, we pass it on and recommend to the council. This is more or less just a comment again, just room for thought. And it occurred to me when we were talking about the item number C, with some of the questions that were asked, that the information that we get on most of these projects, I'm not sure is enough background information that I trust the staff. The staff I know, city manager and staff sit down and decide in large part probably the timing on some of this, what comes a particular month. But again, having said that, if the intent here is to have the public scrutiny over how millions and millions of dollars are spent, I don't know that I just feel like I'm prepared enough, even though I've done it. I just feel a little uncomfortable sometimes on what I know and with my nods of approval. And generally, we approve what comes before us. Again, it's a comment. I'm not sure what the question is, but it's just a thought.
I guess I have a question in regards to your comments, then, because we are a citizen committee that's just recommending, we're not approving.
Exactly.
So is the council getting the same exact information that we get, or do they get an expanded packet? Because they're the ones actually approving.
By and large, they get the exact same copy of the memos that you folks receive. when we enter those into the automated agenda system, there's a bond advisory committee item memo, and there's a city council memo, and they track through the system together. And with your approval on the items, we convert those, and then they go on the next city council agenda. So they're getting as much information as you are. Now, occasionally, you know, they'll ask additional questions, and then the Public Works Director's here, and, you know, if they want us to follow up with additional information, you know, we do that. But they get the same thing you folks get.
And actually, generally speaking, on a lot of the items, they don't get as the same sorts of pictures and the extra detail that's being presented to you all. Just because of the volume that they have to deal with each week, there's not time to go into the same level of detail on each item. So generally, you all are getting a little deeper information in terms of what Public Works brings each time than what the council generally sees.
To me, that even begs the question more. I serve on the Maps Advisory Board, and chair a committee and vice chair of another committee. And I will tell you that the depth of those meetings and the details of those meetings, when we walk out of those subcommittee meetings, we're all aware very, very clearly of what we are recommended to the advisory board, and then the advisory board recommends to the council. So I guess your comment even further reinforces, I guess, my concern, being the case. Again, I'm not arguing, I don't know what information we need. I just saying that well, I've said process. It just resonates with me after hearing that discussion and some of the questions you guys had on that third item. And that's a thought.
Well, we'll be happy to take a look and see if there's other information we can bring to you all that helps give you a fuller picture of what you're at. You know, because, you know, generally speaking, with the bond project, the vast majority of it is defined in those propositions and the listed projects that we can't change. Those are what the voters approved, and so it's on that portion that's
on
unlisted.
Those listed projects.
Right.
I certainly understand that, but there are also unlisted projects.
Certainly, right.
Too, so, and if I'm the only one feeling like this, I'm not suggesting that you do that. I'm just telling you, just as I sit here, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, no, and if they're, and that, maybe I'll talk with you a little bit more afterwards or with the other members in terms of what it is you'd like to see more of, because we'll be happy to provide more information to you.
Yeah, again, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I guess I just feel like what we have sometimes is not enough information that I feel like I have a reasonable amount of information to say, you know, that whatever that project might be, is it okay? And if I'm the only one feeling that, I don't want you to do that. If others don't feel, I'm not trying to get more work for everybody to read either. But having said that, you know, I take the role. I thought this for some time, but I just felt like today was the right.
Certainly. Thank you.
I think it goes back to my question. It may have been not a question about making sure, you know, don't assuming things. We've got our city attorney as part of our meetings that things are being done correctly. And I appreciate that part of it. So we have to speak up, again, not assuming things. So that's a big point as well. But I think as far as making, we're assuming that all the bid processes are being done correctly in accordance to all the requirements. I guess we feel comfortable that we don't need to see all those bids and those processes before we come to the City Works is doing that. And there's enough management and the city council or the city staff is looking at that. Would you agree?
That's not what you're saying. An assumption that I felt is that it is a time-sensitive material that, and I wouldn't want for actual change to be waiting on us to read, to actually go through all the details. It needs to be fixed quickly, so it's just an assumption.
I don't know if it's going to add any comfort to the discussion here, but all of the projects that are brought to the Bond Advisory Committee are considered initially by what we call the Bond Oversight Committee, which is made up of all four of the city managers, Mr. Couch, Mr. Clowers, the two other assistant city managers, the finance director, Mr. Dowler, the budget director, all of the department heads who have funds in either the 2000 or the 2007 bond issue. We usually have those meetings about 10 days prior to this meeting, and I can tell you that there are a number of times where our requests for funding are very much scrutinized by Mr. Couch and his staff. And as a matter of fact, there was one that we wanted to bring to you folks today that Mr. Couch was not quite comfortable with, so we pulled it off the agenda prior to publishing this month's agenda. And then when we go back to the Bond Oversight Committee next month, we're going to have additional information available so they can reconsider that request.
And I know that, and I recognize that, and that's part of my point. The staff does that. The leadership, city leadership does that. And they do vet that. They do deal with that. I know Dennis or Mr. Flowers and others are there. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm not sure what this body really adds to the mix, given that they do that at that level with that information, except the appearance of public scrutiny, when in fact I just don't feel like all the time I have enough information when I walk out of here. Someone would ask me more details about it. And I'm going to let it go at that. I don't want to continue about it anymore.
This body, just real briefly, this body is the evolution of what a long time ago was called the Mayor's Advisory Committee. And they were charged with the other bond issues back in the 70s. And then when we passed the 1989 General Obligation Bond Authorization, we reconvened under the Bond Advisory Committee. We had the first meeting in October of 1990, and the board has evolved since then. Now, we did not have the Bond Oversight Committee until probably 6 or 7 years ago. That was a recommendation in one of the audits on the bond program, and we instituted that change, and that's why, we go through Bond Oversight, Bond Advisory, and then the City Council. So there's 3 separate bodies that consider our requests.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if we call that new business or items from committee members. But within that, both those categories, are there any other comments or questions or anything you want to bring up? Okay, if not, any citizens to be heard? Okay, thank you. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second? Did we get a second? Yes, okay. Those in favor, aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Thank you.